You're listening to The Artist Athlete, episode 111. This podcast is dedicated to Circus. It's a place for professionals in the industry to share their stories, viewpoints, and information, and a place for outsiders to get a sneak peek into this world. Hey friends, fans, and foes, I'm Shannon McKenna. I'm the host of the Artist Athlete podcast and the founder of theartistathlete.com, and we are back, baby. We are running full steam ahead, episodes every single week, and I'm so excited about this next batch of podcasts. Is gonna be dope because it is a collection of podcasts from OG circus artists. As I was talking to the guest who you'll hear about in a minute, we were talking, and you'll hear in the interview, we start talking about how it's important to know the greats. It's important because you got to know where you came from to know where you're going. And so I thought for these next few episodes, we'd do a pretty awesome, flash back to the past to get you guys excited and get you guys intimately acquainted with the voices who built the circus arts the way they are today. So that's what we're doing. Before we get into all that, shout out to my Patreons, patreon.com/theartistathlete. It's the way that this podcast happens. It's the way that we fund the platform. It's the way that we do all the things. Patreon.com/theartistathlete. If you love listening every week, go check it out. There's really cool little prizes you can get just for becoming a Patreon of the podcast. My guest today is circus through and through in his blood. My guest is Richie Gaona. He's a fourth-generation circus performer and a stuntman. He debuted with his family, the Flying Gaonas, at the age of 5 years old and has been traveling the world working with circuses such as Ringling Brothers, Barnum & Bailey, Circus Knee, and the Big Apple Circus, just to name a few. And he was a trainer of Circus of the Stars for 7 years. He has over 45 years of experience and now trains people in the arts of flying trapeze, static trapeze, bungee trapeze, walking high wire, trampoline, and much, much more. On September 18th, 2013, he was inducted into the World Acrobatics Society Gallery of Legends Hall of Fame. It was a tremendous event with acrobatic performers from all acrobatic sports being recognized, including divers, skiers, professional performers, Hollywood stunt people, and circus entertainers. It was an amazing time to sit down with him. I can't wait for you guys to hear what he has to say about circus back then and circus now. Get prepared. Here's my interview with Richie Gaona. Richie Gaona.
There you go.
Welcome to the Artist Athlete podcast. Yes.
Well, thank you for having us.
It's such a pleasure.
Thank you.
I always start by asking people to talk a little bit about themselves. Who are you and what do you do?
Oh my God, what do I do? Well, I started.
Maybe not today, but in general in life.
I mean, my family comes from 4 generations of, circus.
Yeah.
My father did all kinds of different circus acts. And I think to me, he's one of the greatest teachers that's ever lived, I guess, for flying trapeze and almost any kind of circus acts. I mean, a lot of the famous performers I run into now, he goes, oh my God, your dad taught me this, this, and that. It's like he had a hand in a lot of people's lives that I didn't even know about, because they'll come up to me, he goes, oh my God, your dad helped me with this or taught me this. And that's really nice to hear, that he had touched so many different lives and trapeze artists and stuff like that. So, growing up around him and my family, there's 7 of us all together. 4 of us actually did the circus stuff. My 2 younger brothers and my older sister never really had anything to do with any kind of circus stuff. And so there was my older sister, Lupe, who didn't do anything. Then came my brother Armando, Chela, and Tito. So that's their 4 siblings I had. But then there was a 10-year gap. And then my mom started again with me and my 2 younger brothers, Jose and Marco. So, that's a huge gap. And so, once I started knowing what's kind of going on, I was watching my brothers practice, doing they started off with the trampoline act. and then eventually got into trapeze. So I was always around it in some way or another, either bouncing on the trampoline as soon as I was able to walk, and as soon as I was able to start climbing the ladder on the trapeze, I was climbing the ladder on the trapeze. And so that's where my life started. But they were pretty much established, I guess, when I was already born. My brothers had already started touring with my dad. They were all, like Tito was the youngest at the time, about 10. And he already started doing some trampoline and then started getting into the stuff with trapeze and stuff like that. And their love was really the flying trapeze to begin with. And so we just, became the Flying Gaonas then, and started touring the United States, all over the United States. They came over from Mexico, and my dad started on some of the smaller shows, but then eventually, got so well known. They were with the Ringling brothers for almost 18 years, besides traveling all over the world. And then I guess I'll give you my story, watching them do this all, I would go, well, my mom said, okay, these younger ones have to stop and go to school. So my mom put us all in regular school. So I grew up pretty much as a local townie, if you want to call it, or, we grew up. But every summer, I would go and visit wherever they were traveling at the time with Ringling Brothers and hang out with them, and sometimes would perform with them. Sometimes they would do TV shows, even when I was a little kid, and I would go do the TV show and come back to school. But I guess I really wanted to do the flying trapeze. So as soon as I got out of high school, it was like, here I go. I'm going to go try to do this and make something out of it, And my father at the time, this was around 74, 75, he already started working at like a theme park that Ringling Brothers had put together called Circus World near Orlando. And they already had, it's kind of like, to be honest with you, it's almost like the first time that the general public was able to go and do any of the circus stuff that they see. So it was called, in this theme park at Ringling Brothers and Barton and Bailey Circus World, inside this theme park, there was a participation circus. So, and, at the time, nobody really would ever put the general public on anything, It was more like a traditional or generational thing that they would pass on to the kids. So my dad had said, no, we're going to do like a demo of maybe high wire, trampoline, low wire, flying trapeze. And then we're going to ask the audience to volunteer to try to do those stuff that we just demonstrated. So, and they were like, how are you going to put people on this stuff safely and all this? He goes, no, we'll do it. We'll be there, with safety lines and all that kind of stuff. So he had started there about a year or two before I graduated from high school and started this participation circus. And of course, I told him, hey, I like to come out there if there's a job available, or, if you can pull any strings or whatever. So he had me at home flying on our trapeze rigging in the backyard, kind of getting me ready to go to work over there. And once I was ready, he brought me over there. And that was like 76, maybe 1976. I started working there. We had some really great catchers and other flyers there working with my dad. And within 6 months, I was able to catch my first triple, which was pretty good, I think. And we had, I had the best teacher there all the time working with us, my dad. And we had plenty of time to practice. So it was practice and getting paid for it at the same time, which was fantastic, of course. You know what I mean? You can't beat that. So I was about 3 years there with them. Then all of a sudden, my family, Armando, my brothers, who had been on the Ringling Brothers for all these years, were invited to go to Australia and Japan. And my cousin, who was catching at the time, didn't want to go overseas. So my oldest brother, Armando, said, look, let's have Richie join the act and I'll catch. And that's how my career with them actually flew up. I started flying with them. We went to Australia. They came actually to Circus World, and we had only about 2 weeks of rehearsal for him, not to learn how to catch, but learn how to catch us. He's only caught a couple times, and because he was a flyer, not really a catcher. So, but he knew how to catch. So it took us about 2 weeks. We only had 2 weeks before we went to Australia. So we
Can I
flew out.
interrupt really quickly?
Sure,
Just
sure.
to make sure that the listeners who may not be very aware of what flying trapeze is, I know that there are people out there. Can you just like very quickly and simply kind of explain like what a catcher is, what a flyer is,
Okay.
and then
So,
what that relationship
yeah.
is about? Yeah.
Well, a trapeze rigging, a full-size trapeze rigging sits about 34 feet up in the air. You have a platform on one end, your trapeze in the middle, and then the catcher at the other end. So overall, it's about maybe 35 feet in distance, And then of course, you have your trapeze net underneath. A lot of people think, oh, you got a net, or some people think that, because they've seen so many movies, oh, you don't need a net, right? And you do. You need the net. You do need the net. Nobody's perfect. But sometimes they also think, oh, you got a net. But you can actually get hurt landing a net if you don't know how to do it right. So you start in the platform, you grab the trapeze bar, and you swing out, you swing back, and then on the second swing out, you start doing your trick. It could be anything from a simple split to the quadruple somersault, and then you get caught. You go out to the opposite end, then you swing back, do a half turn or a pirouette, and catch the bar, and then you're back on the platform. Did I explain it pretty good?
I think that's great. And
Yeah.
then you get caught by a catcher.
Your catcher's your catcher's at the other end, who will catch you kind of like this, not like a handheld. It's, a good locking position, and he'll take you, hopefully, if everything works out, and he's a good catcher, you won't have a problem.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. And so someone like Armando, who had been a flyer, learned to catch pretty quickly because he grew up around flying trapeze.
Right.
But I think it's just really interesting what you said about like he knew how to catch, but he had to learn how to catch you guys. Because I think what's neat about flying trapeze is that everybody has their own timing and everybody has their own kind of ways to do things. And so I just wanted to clarify that for the audience.
No, yeah, it's true. I mean, but he had watched Tito and my sister fly so many times that he knew all his habits, or their habits, you know what I mean? So he was kind of learning my habits, more or less. And I mean, it's one of those I told you so moments when he was trying to learn how to catch, and my dad kept telling him, make sure you squeeze on your legs, push down on your heels, make sure, because you're going to get pulled out of the catcher if you don't, So one time my brother Tito was throwing his triple somersault. It was a little short, means that he's a little far from the catcher. But Armando at the same time decided, hey, I'm going to really stretch out and reach out for him. When he did that part, he relaxed his legs a little bit, like my dad kept telling him not to do. So when they caught, they both came out of the trapeze and landed in the net.
Oh, no.
And my father's, of course, one of those, hey, I told you so. You know what I mean? Luckily, they didn't get hurt or anything like that. They landed actually perfect. But it was one of those moments where, you think you know what you're doing all the time. In the last second, it can, catch you by surprise, So it's one of those things my dad just kept drilling into all of us, listen to what you're doing, make sure you do this, this, and that, or you're going to get hurt, So, but after that, it was fine. He never came out of the catch bar ever again.
It only takes one.
It takes only one, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I interrupted your story. You got your big break kind of with your family traveling to Japan. Is that correct?
Yes, Australia and Japan.
Australia.
Australia we did like 6 months, and then went to Tokyo for 6 months. So I got to actually fly with my family 24/7 kind of thing, which I always wanted to do, since I was a little kid. And I think it was one of the best experiences of my life, From there, we went back to Europe with Circus Kinney for, the whole tour there. And we also did Circus Scott in Sweden. And then we went all over the place in South America with some Mexican circuses that we've known for so many years that they've always wanted us, even the shows in Europe, wanted my brothers there so many times, but Ringling Brothers wouldn't let them go because they kept them on the contract all those years, So after Australia and Japan, that's when they finished with the Ringling Brothers. They say, hey, let's go back to Europe, and that's what they did. And that's where I got to go with them and, visit all these great countries and stuff like that. But we also did a show called the Big Apple Circus in New York every year from the very time they started. I think it was 1982, maybe, I think it was. We joined the Big Apple Circus at Lincoln Center and did those shows for about 6 years, I think it was. The winter tour and the summer tour also.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So I have kind of an interesting relationship. I have an interesting kind of thought about flying trapeze. It's so very circus, and as I mentioned before we started recording, I'm in Montreal, which has a very kind of contemporary or like new interpretation of circus. And there's a lot of dance elements. There's a lot of other performance elements. And I find flying trapeze to be such a pure circus discipline because it has this kind of like course that, like you said, there's a platform, there's a bar, there's a catcher.
Right.
And you do anything from a split to a quad. No one's done 5 rotations yet.
Not on a traditional flying trapeze, no.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm wondering how you guys had so much work, or like what distinguished the Flying Gaonas from other troops?
Well, to be honest with you, I mean, like I said, my brother's already been so well established by the time I joined them. And even now, going back and watching videotapes, I can kind of see it was my brother Tito had this charisma about him that was really amazing. He would catch the audiences, and capture David. They would just almost feel like they were flying with him, I guess, and he would actually have a lot of fun with the audience. I mean, nowadays, a lot of the Cirque shows you don't really get to see people's expressions when they're working. There's not that, oh my God, there was, like certain stars in the circus, like in Ringling Brothers, they would actually bill you as, oh, here comes Tito Gaona this year, doing all these tricks, or Gunther Gable Williams, the animal trainer, or Alvin Bale, the single trap artist. Everything is kind of blended into everybody's the same now. You know what I mean? And that's how I look at a lot of the shows now. And sometimes old circus is really good circus, I think. You know what I mean? And everything they say is new, it's not new. Everything they say, this is new to circus, I've seen that 30 years. And I haven't been, put it this way, I haven't been impressed at all in the last 20 years. You know what I mean? And it's like, oh my God, this is new. I go, no, it's a combination of this and that put together to make it look like that. You know what I mean? And I haven't seen anything that goes, oh my God, that is really cool. It depends on the performer, how they perform it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what I think has a lot to do with it, instead of just anybody coming out and doing something, and not being able to really have my family, my brothers and my sister, I think had this charisma that kind of puts them on a different level more. My father used to say, it's not how you do the trick, it's how you perform it, maybe. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah.
And there's a lot of performers who do some great tricks, but they don't sell it very well. And that's, I think, kind of a sad point to that. They're like, oh my God, they're pretty good, but they don't come across on the stage very presentable, maybe, if that makes any kind of sense.
No, that absolutely 100% makes sense. And I love that you say that, because I think that's something that when I talk to people over and over again is a common theme. And even in a more traditional sense, or like an older circus style, it's still true. It's not about the trick, it's about the performer. So
it is about the performer, and what charisma they bring to that,
Yeah.
I've seen like maybe 5 single trapeze girls do the same tricks, but when they come across selling it the way they do, one will stand out more than the other at any time.
Do you ever get kind of, it sounds, I like that thing of like, I've seen everything. I remember having a coach once who was like, I asked him if he liked some circus show or something. He was like, are you kidding me? I've seen a guy do 3 back tucks on a horse. It means he had to be moving forward while he was going backward. Like he's just talking about that kind of like, what is all this? Have you ever felt like there's kind of like a loss of the magic because of that?
But there is a big loss of the magic, I believe so, honestly.
Yeah.
And that's where, again, we'll go back to like some of the Cirque shows, and even any other shows right now, they there's a distance between the performer and the audience almost. Sometimes you want to almost talk to the audience as you're doing this stuff, and my brother was really good about that. I mean, I'm more on the shy type, if you want to call it that way.
Okay.
I could style real good maybe and everything, but he was able to draw them in and perform with them almost, you know what I mean? And that's what they loved about my brother, I think. And you can see that in the videotapes nowadays, the old videotapes, the way he would be with the audience. And I think that has a lot to do with the connection with the audience. I know a lot of the Cirque shows that, they wear these masks and they're just kind of like robots almost. It's the modern, I guess you want to call it modern circus or something like that. But there was one or two times where I've seen a couple shows that they bring, a couple Cirque shows where they bring in actual generation performers who've been doing this for a while, and you can totally see a difference.
Sure.
When they're performing in that show, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Do you think it's something you can learn, or do you think it is just kind of in the blood, that performance quality?
In our documentary, there's people talking about my brother, and they keep saying he has that it factor. You know what I mean? And I think you actually almost need to be born with that almost. You know what I mean? It's hard to. There was 4 of us working. My sister had her way of doing things. My other brother Armando was another kind of quiet one like me, but he had his presence. My sister had her presence. I had my presence more or less, but then Tito stood out. You know what I mean? He was like right there. I don't know. He had that it factor, if you want to call it, And I've seen other performers who had that it factor, and you can see the difference right away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to actually, I'm so curious, generationally, you said you're 4th generation?
Yes.
Is that correct? What did you guys do flying trapeze all the way back? What was first generation?
Like my father was an all around kind of circus guy. He did the bareback ride. He did the slack wire. Okay. He did tight wire. He would do a casting act, which is a low trapeze to the ground. He was a clown. His brother was a clown, but maybe that's why he learned so many different, acts and different, he was a great acrobat to begin with. And that's why I think he was such a great teacher, because he had a little bit of all of that put into one and was able to teach people certain stuff like that.
What did your grandparents do?
Excuse me?
What did your grandparents do?
Well, they were believe it or not, some of them were clowns.
Okay.
A lot of them, there was a few grandparents that owned different circuses, the Gaona Circus in Mexico and stuff like that. But we also have a great uncle who was a famous bullfighter in Mexico that I recently found out a few years ago. And there's a big statue in Tijuana, and there's some statues in Mexico City that, Adolfo Gaona was a great bullfighter. One of the stunt coordinators I worked with one time, who speaks a lot of Spanish and spent a lot of time in Spain, told me more about him than I ever knew about him, because he knew all about him. He goes, "Oh my God, you're great. He did this, and that. He used to beat all the people in Spain on their bullfighting and all this stuff." So we come from a lot of generations of some kind of entertainment.
Incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Mm. So when you moved from trapeze to stunts?
Oh, let me just go back to a little bit. Because I remember, my brothers were doing trampoline act mainly at the time. But my brother Tito, the reason we all got into the flying trapeze was because of the movie Trapeze with Burt Lancaster and Tony Curtis. Back in, I think it was 1955 or something like that. And Tito being Tito and Tino being Tino in the movie, he wanted to be like Tino. And honestly, that's the reason we started doing flying trapeze, because of the movie. They kept seeing it quite a few times. So because of the movie Trapeze, they made my dad actually buy a trapeze rigging and started flying trapeze. Started practicing in the backyard kind of thing. So their career went from trampoline to trapeze to, finishing their career off as trapeze artists.
Did you guys have lines ever? I'm interested, in recreational flying trapeze. So if any of you guys have been to TSNY, is a big company in the States, there are others. But the first time you go on a flying trapeze, if you're not, in a show, is you'll probably have a belt on, and you'll have lines that someone on the ground will be pulling to make sure that you don't land on your head in the net. Did you, as already seasoned acrobats who kind of had the spatial awareness, did you guys use lines or anything like that when you started training?
They did, just very little, very little in the beginning. But see, the trampoline helped a lot because they knew how to do all the tricks, Yeah. So they had to learn how to fly and then kind of blend that together. And I think in the movie, the documentary, you see them doing a lot of tricks without lines, and they, because I go back and think about it too. I go, well, that was kind of nuts, but but they did. They did a lot of stuff out of lines.
Wow.
And even on the trampoline, my dad would always, okay, you got the idea. Let's just put one line on you, and I'll kind of safety you.
Okay.
And then a lot of times he goes, okay. I go, Dad, but I don't, he goes, leave the belt on. You'll think you still have the lines on if you have the belt on.
Huh.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he was using all the psychology on me sometimes, and it would work. I felt comfortable with that I had the belt on, thinking I was still attached to the lines, but I didn't, But so it's like little by little, he would take things off, But yeah, I would say 80% of the times we didn't have lines back then. Now you do, of course, when I teach now, I have people on lines all the time,
Yeah.
But back then it's now just go for it. So,
did you ever feel afraid or anything like that? Or are you always just kind of like, let's do the thing?
I think about that now sometimes. And I try to remember going back, well, I tried that trick and I don't think at the time we were practicing so much that you felt confidence to go and do that trick, And we've had small accidents like everybody else has, but you get back up on the horse, like they say, and try it again, I had my brother's fallen out of the net before, and I've had a small thing where on the trapeze, the little shackle snapped on me on a triple.
Oh no.
And it snapped, hit me in the head. I went tumbling. Luckily I landed in the net, because I kind of let go right at the right time too at the same time, but I ended up all the way at the other end of the net, and I got up, my head was bleeding, but okay, that shackle doesn't work. Well, let's fix it so it doesn't ever happen again, But but you get back up, and that first time you go back up to do that same trick, you get a little nervous, just like anything else. But it was a technical problem. It wasn't anything I did wrong, So we'll get back up there and do it again, and it was fine, I think I never really got scared. Maybe I get a little nervous, let's say opening night kind of thing, but, and then I would get nervous more than anything because my brothers already had this famous about them, they were already established. They already knew who they were. So I had to kind of keep up with that coming in, so it was like, oh, these are the Flying Gaonas or whatever. And I go, well, I just started with them, you know what I mean? But no, so I got to act like I've been around all those years too, So I flew with them almost for 12 years almost before I went into stunts.
I think it's so interesting that you kind of say them like they're like, I don't know, like when I think of the Flying Gaonas or when I'm watching the documentaries and things, I'm like, it's a family.
Yeah, but it's like a family, but it's almost, to me, it's always been like two families.
Okay.
My older brothers.
Right.
Then the 10-year gap.
Right.
And then my younger, me and my two younger brothers. And the thing was, they were always traveling. We went to regular school. We were regular things in town. I went surfing all my life, and just joined them in the summer. So seemed to us, it was always like two families.
Oh, interesting.
But we're all brothers and sisters, you know what I mean? But they always were gone for a whole season. Then they come back, that kind of thing. But again, like I said, they had already stepped up to the plate more or less and became the Flying Gaonas. I actually, like I said, I would fly with them every once in a while just for fun or in the summer or TV shows. But when I joined them, it was like, okay, this is it. I got to step up the game kind of thing and keep up the tradition of the Flying Gaonas kind of thing.
Wow.
So that's where I would get nervous sometimes opening night in different shows in Europe or whatever it was. But I think I pulled it off.
I think you did all right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, hey there. I just wanted to interrupt this interview real quick to just say one real quick little thing about myself, which is that I am not only the host of the Artist Athlete podcast. No. She is a businesswoman, and I run a whole company dedicated to the education and inspiration of circus artists. That goes from people who are just doing it, weekend warriors, as a hobbyist, recreationally, or if you're a professional, you've put in the hours and you need more resources, go to theartistathlete.com. There are a ton of recorded workshops, online manuals and ebooks, everything you could possibly need from me and from some guests on this show about everything from nutrition to training your shoulders to really specific aerial moves that you need to master. Again, theartistathlete.com. And just because you went there from listening to this podcast, use code PODCAST and get 15% off your entire purchase. That's right. Theartistathlete.com. Use code PODCAST at checkout for 15% off your entire purchase. And have a great day. Back to the episode. And so you went from flying to stunts.
Yes. I said, well, there was a guy who used to travel with us sometimes who's always been in the stunt business. It goes all the way back into the late 30s, early 40s, but he was also a trapeze artist. And when we would come to California, he would always come to visit us. And I always watched his career as a stuntman, and I've always thought it was a great career and stuff like that. And finally I said to him one day, I go, Bobby, if I ever try to get into stunts, I would love to, He goes, well, if you ever want to get into stunts, let me know. I'll help you out as much as I can. And I said, okay, well, maybe. So eventually, before I got too old, as they said, I wanted to try to do this. So I talked to my family about it and everything. They were, understanding about it and all that. So I had my cousin take my place, and I continue on to California to try to do the stunt business. And they traveled for another 5 or 6 years. Well, I think they all retired around 97. So it was almost 8 years later that they decided to, retire after I left them.
And why did you decide to leave? Why did you decide to leave?
Well, it's like I said, something stunt-wise, something I really always wanted to do, even as a little kid.
Okay.
Is I don't know, jump off of things and get thrown around and things like that. I was always a movie buff to begin with.
Okay.
And knowing a couple people in the business was like, okay, well, maybe one of those guys will help me out. And I don't know if it's a big break or whatever. When we were on the Big Apple Circus, Bob Yerkes is the name of the guy who helped me out, was in New York at the time filming a movie called Remo Williams. And they were on the Statue of Liberty doing this big fight scene, all of them fighting up there. Because at the time they were doing the Statue of Liberty was surrounded by scaffolding because they were redoing it, a lot of it and stuff like that. So they were able to actually shoot on the Statue of Liberty. So he knew that we were in New York City with the Big Apple Circus. So he actually brought about 6 of the stunt guys to the show. So I got to meet them and some of the actors or whatever. And when I met some of the stunt guys, I go, yeah, I'm thinking about getting a business, do this. Bobby said he would help. He goes, well, yeah, let me know if you're ever in California, look us up. So a few years later, I looked up some of those guys that came to see me perform. And that's where I think I had a slight edge of getting into the business because they had seen me do what I do, performing wise and stuff like that. And they like that background coming into the business kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's very disciplined and all that. And, of course, you need to get a SAG card, is your union card. So that was my biggest hurdle, is trying to get my union card because, they won't just give it to you. So you got to earn it somehow. And they kind of, Bob Yerkes he goes, oh, there's something coming up that I might be able to get your union card. And it has something to do with trapeze. I said, oh, that was perfect. Whatever works, So I got there, I think it was December, 1st of January, actually. I got there in 88, 1st of January. And so I worked at it in LA, yeah. So I worked hard at it, trying to, do some training, some fighting and stuff like that. And then a friend of mine who actually went through clown college was like an agent out there in California too. And he found out I was there. And he said, hey, there's a commercial. They want to film a Panasonic commercial. Back then, the cameras were still really big. But it had this new floating lens in it that, anything you walking around, the picture will still be perfect kind of thing. It was some kind of stabilizing lens. So, but you got to, they want to put somebody on a 6-foot high wire walking across, filming something on the other side. And I go, okay, I can walk a wire. My dad taught us a lot of different tricks. But you got to film, and you actually have to film an object on the other side. So at Bob Yerkes' house, he has all the stuff set up. He has trapeze, has high wires, all kinds of things. So I went for the audition. There was about 50 stunt guys there and trying to do this. and they're trying to walk across the wire. And these old cameras before, you could actually flip up the little magnifier. You could, you know how you keep your eye on the lens usually to look through, but you can flip up on this camera. You could flip up the lens, and you can still see what you need to film. So everybody was trying to put the camera like this and walk the wire, and they would fall off. And I was watching everybody. I go, okay, there's got to be a trick to this, you know. And half of them didn't really even know how to walk a wire. So once I got up there, I looked at the camera. I flipped this thing up. And on the high wire or wire, when you walk a wire, you kind of have to focus at the other end no matter what, you know, or you're going to fall down. So I got up there and flipped this thing. I could kind of frame what I was filming, but at the same time with this eye, I can still see where I was going and kept my balance, and I never fell off. So I got this commercial. Getting the commercial gave me my SAG card. So that's how I got into the business, through a commercial for Panasonic.
Interesting. Yeah. Walking a wire.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I do know about, I grew up in Atlanta, and Atlanta is a big film town now. And I do know some people in the stunt business, and my understanding is that they can kind of call you up for anything at any time. Like if you're in.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes when, you know, they go, oh, we need this, because I've given a SAG card to quite a few people already, being in the business now, where it's something to do with circus related maybe. And I go, you know, we need to film like a couple commercials we shot in my backyard for American Express. And the people that actually were going to do it, they picked, didn't have a SAG card, but they've been training with me.
Okay.
So I got maybe, I don't know, about 10 people their SAG cards through different things we've done, which is kind of cool because I was able to pass it on to somebody else.
That's super cool. Yeah, I've heard that circus, that people in the business really like circus performers, people in stunts, because we're so versatile in some ways. Exactly.
I know a lot of Cirque du Soleil kids, you know, are doing that now because of what they do, and they, you know, they last a couple of years with Cirque du Soleil, and then they get into stunts, and now they're in the stunt business, you know.
Yeah, very cool. Mm-hmm. If someone's interested in that path, someone in circus who wants to go into stunts, what advice would you give them?
Well, I think it's the same advice that they've told me about, you know, do some extra work, be around the camera, you know, be around the set, see how things are running. So you don't come in there looking like, you know, a smart ass or, you know, whatever. And, you know, trying to say, I know how to do this and that. I've always been the kind of person who just sits there and studies the surroundings and just watches everybody. I mean, I love watching a film being filmed. So a lot of times if they say, oh, you can go back to your dressing room, I'll sit there on the set if I'm allowed and just watch everybody work, you know, from the cable, you know, the electricians to the carpenters to the actors, you know, and the directors. And I just love that whole, everybody participating to put this thing together, you know, nice. and the outcome. And the history of it, you know, the whole history of filmmaking or anything like that, you know. So I would say start with, you know, doing a lot of extra work and just being around the set, you know, getting to know the lingo and how people talk on there. So you don't, you know what you're doing when you do start to be in the business, you know, and that helps a lot, I think. So you don't just show up very green and not knowing what's going on, you know?
Yeah, 100%. And I love kind of how, you know, your tip about that is kind of almost like reflecting that performer aspect of knowing the tricks. It's like the advice you can give to someone is like, yeah, you have to have the goods, but then you have to study the actual art form that you're engaging with, you know? Definitely. It's not enough to just be able to like.
That's where we go back to what we were talking about before we started this, is that, you know, if you get into something you really love to do, kind of know where it came from, you know, the history of it. I see a lot of circus performers and, you know, we'll talk about, you know, who invented that trick? Well, my brother invented that trick. Well, who was your brother? You know what I mean? Or who was Miguel Vasquez, who caught the quadruple so many times? You know what I mean? And a lot of people don't know who these people are. And even in the stunt business, like I said, you know, we'll go and I've been doing stunts since '88, which is a long time. And I could be on a set with some of the young guys. I go, oh my God, have you ever heard of Dar Robinson doing this? He goes, well, who's Dar Robinson? And he was the guy who invented the airbag, you know, with Bob Yerkes and the sender cables, you know, and all this stuff. And they go, no, I never heard it. I go, why are you in this business when you don't know, you know, where this stuff came from, you know? And it really irritates me that they don't know the history of what they love to do. And knowing the history, I think you would enjoy it even more somehow, if that makes any sense. You know what I mean?
Oh, totally. I think about like, could you imagine if you went to, I don't know, Rome and you didn't know anything about the Holy Roman Empire?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's knowing all the stuff that that you are doing. Any kind of, if it's walking the wire. Well, who was the first one to walk the wire, or what tricks did they do in the wire back then? And or anything in the circus. And it's really, I think it's really part of the history of what you're trying to do. And I think it would help you out in the long run, knowing the history behind what you're doing. And I think it helps out a lot, I think, somehow.
How did you learn the history?
Oh, I mean, well, part of it was my family.
He's like, I am the history.
No, it's not me, but my family and all that,
Sure.
And knowing, like being on the Ringling show when we first got on there, nowadays, I wish I knew more about the history, put it that way, because there's some of the performers that were still there were the ones from back in the 40s who were maybe retired, but they were doing other things on the show. Like the first woman who ever did the triple somersault was Antoinette Cancello. And she was in, all these movies, The Greatest Show on Earth. And, she was on the Ringling show since she was, like the late 20s almost, And she was still there 1964, 65 when we joined the show. And I remember her because she actually wanted to fly with my brother sometimes. So my sister sometimes would say, sit out one show, and she would come up and still fly and do an easy trick, but she still loved that performance. She was the choreographer of a lot of the aerial acts at the time. And if I knew more of the history, I mean, I was too young almost back then. Who cares about who was doing what? But I wish I could go back and talk to her about all the stuff from when she started almost, that kind of thing. And meet some of these people. I mean, I met some of these people, but at the time I didn't know who they were until later in life. I go, oh my gosh, she used to be at our house, or he used to be at our house. And he's they came from this big circus family or trapeze family that I didn't know about back then, and knowing all that stuff now, I wish I could go back and talk to them about it and things like that.
What would you ask them, or what would you talk about?
Well, it's like, how were they able to do these triple somersaults maybe back then when everything's so primitive, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Instead of these cables, they were doing stuff off of these old, like rope, as the trapeze and stuff like that. And the net was so hard to land in because they didn't have these soft nets like they do nowadays, they used to practice like in a barn in Indiana or Illinois, I think it was. And, they would just build this stuff because I saw some of this stuff at the museum a few years back, and I go, I can't believe they were using this stuff. You know what I mean? But, it starts somewhere. Everything starts somewhere that, even now in a few years, something's always going to be better than what we had today. Just like, what we have today was much better than what we had maybe 5 years ago even, So, yes, everything, evolves.
Yeah, I mean, this makes me want to ask you, like, what was it like when you started? How has it evolved since?
I think, here's the other thing, being with a family, nowadays, there's not too many, first of all, there's not that many trapeze acts anymore.
No. Why is that?
Well, because they're not family oriented. I mean, my brothers they started performing, let's say, Tito, my brother, who was 10, when I was born, had already started performing when he was, I think, like 8 or 9, A family sticks together pretty much no matter what. There's some rough times, oh my God, we didn't get a contract. Okay, nowadays they say, I'll see you later. I'm going to go join some other thing or something like that, But back then, we would stick together. And my family, my brothers, they were together from late 50s all the way to 97 performing. And always the same people. A couple of times my cousin would take my place, or another cousin would take, a place because maybe somebody got injured for a little while. But it was always family. Now, maybe there's like 2 brothers, but they got to hire like 2 girls or another guy to come in. But you can't depend on them because if something better comes along, they're going to go. Then you're stuck with, not having a full act. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Why do you think that is? What happened?
I don't know, to be honest. I mean, for our family, like my younger brother, I mean, my son actually never was around it as much as like I was. So he didn't have the opportunity to continue flying or catching. He's become the great catcher. I mean, but in a more like of a school sense, you know what I mean? He's caught some of the greatest flyers, to be honest with you. I mean, and some of the biggest tricks, but he hasn't had that opportunity to perform like we did, in a show every day and all that kind of stuff. And I hate to say this, but it's almost like the art form is dying out to a degree. You know what I mean? The tradition is starting to fade out. I mean, there's a lot of, people doing trapeze and doing all kinds of stuff, but ask them how long they last, or, or how long they're going to continue. You know what I mean? I think even some of the best performers nowadays have only lasted maybe 10 to 15 years, maybe, if that, and then they fade out, or here's the other thing. They get hurt because they're trying too many things. That my brother was always saying, look, if they're not going to pay me for this big trick, I'm not going to do it every day. Seriously, you know what I mean? I'm not going to kill myself for this, But if, yes, I am Tito Gaona and I'm going to do my triple every day. But now if you want me to do the quad, this is a different story. Let's redo the contract maybe, you know what I mean? So my dad was really good about that. You got to keep yourself or take care of yourself if you want to last a long time in this business. And a lot of performers nowadays don't really last that long, which I'm surprised. I mean, there's a couple of people I know who are really good performers, but I've known them maybe when they're 20 years old and they're doing some great tricks, but now they're not even flying. And that's only been maybe 12 years, 13 years ago, and they're not even performing anymore.
Because they're injured.
Either they're injured or people are not, giving the contracts out like they used to. There's not that many flying trapeze acts that are, Ringling's closed now.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I mean, there's only very few traditional circuses around. I mean, you can go to Europe; they're still there. Some of them, but they're, I think, which I think is very sad. But I don't think it's like it was 20, 30 years ago. Even Ringling show became a big 3-ring show to a 1-ring circus at the end almost. You know what I mean? And it wasn't the same like it used to be. I mean, they used to have, I don't know, so many performers in the show, and then because they had to fill up 3 rings of performers, and they're 3 different acts. So there used to be 3 flying trapeze acts at some point, and then it just starts to fade out somehow.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about that in different ways too. Bankin troops, I feel the same way about these like acts that require a lot of people. Yeah, require a lot of money.
That's the thing nowadays, and a lot of people don't want to pay for a huge group of people.
Right.
I mean, there was only 4 of us, and some of the trapeze are, acts now. I mean, last one my brother helped put together was on the Ringling show. It was a side-by-side trapeze, so it's double. They had, I think, like 12 people on the act,
Okay.
But that's a lot of people to pay, So
sure.
Which I understand, But if I was to make a trapeze troupe right now, I'll keep it down to like 4 people, But the quality's got to be up there, It can't be just people doing some easy tricks. I'd rather have 4 good people doing a great act than 12 people doing barely anything. You know what I mean? So
yeah, because it's almost like when you have those side-by-side rigs, it's like the spectacle is the machinery.
It's the movement.
It's the rigging.
It's all the movement and everything else. But what tricks are they doing?
Yeah.
Some of them are good. Some of them are good. I know, like on Circus Vargas, they had a great troupe for once, But then, they lose some good flyers and then they're down to, just maybe one side only who's doing some big tricks and stuff like that. But it's hard. I think nowadays is much harder than it used to be.
Do you think there's a bit of like an audience issue with that too? Like I'm thinking about the understanding or appreciation of people watching someone rotate 4 times in the air versus a side-by-side.
I think it comes down to the internet. Everything, you can see anything and everything on the internet.
Always the internet.
It's not like you want to go actually see it in person. You know what I mean?
Okay.
It's not the same. I mean, to go to a show, it's magic, pretty much what it was.
Yeah.
But now you see stuff on the internet, and people get more entertained watching people wreck. If they want to, do jumping from building to building, this parkour stuff, and I mean, it's just like, kids nowadays, you see them at a restaurant, and the parents go, "Here's the iPad, go entertain yourself while we eat dinner." And it's not the same like go outside and play with your friends. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think the internet has done some damage to live shows of any kind, almost, I think, but I don't know. Especially this past year when nobody was doing anything, you can figure it out. Oh my God, that was right there. You look at it and go, oh my God, the shows are shutting down everywhere. Not just here. And performers are going, oh my God, we're not working here. We're not working in Europe.
Absolutely.
I just talked to a friend of mine in Switzerland, who was actually here in California taking his pilot license because he's always wanted to learn how to fly. But he goes, Richie, I have to go back because he's like a one-man circus. He does all these. It's a small, cute tent, and he does everything. He's a great wild walker. He used to be with us on the Big Apple Circus. Great performer. And he goes, I have to go back, and they want to open the show within a month. And he goes, I haven't been on the wire, and I don't know how long. I don't know how I'm going to do this again. And we just talked about that, trying to get back into the swing of things, if you want to call it, and get yourself back motivated to start doing all this stuff. It's nuts. But, hopefully things will come back, and, the live shows will come back. I know some of the shows here in Vegas, the small shows, are starting to open up, so we'll see what happens.
Nice. Yeah. What is your friend's name, the guy in Switzerland?
David Demetric.
Okay. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And his father was a famous clown in Circus in Switzerland. Yes. And David he was a great wild walker. Do you know anything about Circupedia?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Dominique Jandot's.
John Doe was with us on the Big Apple for a long time.
Okay.
So I know him really well. But you'll find David's stuff on there too. It's really a great performer.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
One of my hopes for post-pandemic world is that everybody's sick of watching everything on the internet, and they'll come out and just want to.
That's exactly
see
right.
Live things. That's my hope and my faith and my.
Well, I kind of starting to see that here in Vegas, more people coming out and doing stuff, and
cool.
Which is, I think June 1st right now they're saying they want to open Vegas 100%.
Wow.
So, I know some of the coaches are working with me at the trapeze school here. Are coaches with like Ka and O, and they're already trying to get some of the rehearsal going about opening. I think they're going to open Mystere and O first, in mid-July, and hopefully open some of the other shows maybe towards the end of summer or beginning of fall maybe.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. In Canada, they're still rolling out vaccinations, so I'm not vaccinated yet. That's where we're at. So, but I got my appointment. So
there
it'll
you
be
go.
soon.
There you go. Yeah.
Well, incredible. Is there anything else? We're kind of coming to the end of the hour, but I have one more question for you.
Ask me.
Well, my question is, what advice would you give to yourself at the beginning of your career?
Well, I feel like I have had 2 or 3 different careers, which is kind of odd. As a youngster, I was, want to perform with my family, which I was able to do. But, I'm kind of in between my flying career and my stunt career.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I wish I would have started maybe 10 years earlier as a stuntman. That kind of thing. That's the only, I don't want to say it's the only regret I have, because they've both been really good to me.
Yeah.
I've done over 100 films, and every one I've done has been a great film or fun to work on, or never had like anything negative about any of the films I worked on.
Okay.
And the same with my flying career. There was never anything negative about that.
Why do you wish you had started 10 years earlier then?
I don't know. Maybe to be established more as a second unit director, or start directing films. Because I know a lot of the stunt guys who moved on as second unit directors and directors. And they're directing films, like big action films and stuff like that. But again, like I was always the one back there watching more, you know, and listening kind of thing. Because I know a couple stunt guys, oh, I know how to do that. And they act like they know everything, you know, and I've never been like that, you know. But I don't know I don't want to say I wish I did, because they both turned out great. You know what I mean? Maybe 10 years earlier, I would have done even more stunts. You know, I'm getting old, and I just worked a month and a half ago. They yanked the hell out of me on a cable. And I go, holy crap. Okay. I went flying like 30 feet just now, and we did it like 12 times. And a couple days later, I could barely walk. I was so sore, you know? It's like, it's a huge difference. It's easy to fall, but it's much harder to get up nowadays after the fall. So, I mean, I wish I was younger at the time I started to do maybe more and crazier stuff. I don't know.
Do you do anything differently now? I get a lot of people who write in specifically about circus, but I think stunts and body care kind of, you know, everybody's got a body. And people ask a lot, like, this has been something I've been exploring since you know, I'm an old lady at 34. You know, like I train completely differently now. The way that I eat, the way that my body, the way I recover is really different. Do you do anything specific now that you're a little older to like recover and get up after you fall?
No, just took some more aspirin. You know, I mean,
it's not like here on the Artist Athlete podcast.
No, I used to be, you know, when I was doing stunts all the time, you know, I would really try to take care of my body and stuff like that, of course. Okay. Hey, I'm going to be 64 next week.
Happy birthday.
And it's like, thank you. Hey, I've done it. I've been there. You know, now it's like I'm more like on vacation kind of thing. We bought an RV, and now I'm just kind of going anytime we get 3 days, you know, where we can go off for 3 or 4 days, we'll take the RV and go, you know. I guess it's called retirement soon, you know. But, you know, I still, you know, I mean, everybody right now being off this whole year has gotten a little heavier because they just sat and watched TV and ate, you know.
Sure.
And it's the older you get, it's harder to take it off, you know, and harder to kind of get back into that shape. So I just said, hey, I've been there, done it. I'm happy. And I just right now just trying to take care of myself for the last remaining years or whatever I have, and just have fun with it. Some people go, hey, you still fly? I go, no, but you can go watch a video if you want. You know? So I don't want to get sore anymore.
Excellent. Richie Gaona, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. It was amazing
welcome.
To talk to you. Awesome.
You're welcome.
And we will put up documentaries and all the links to all the things. Check it out in the show notes, listeners.
Okay. Send me a link once you get a hold of it.
Oh, yeah, I will. That was my interview with Richie Gaona. It was such an honor to have such a huge circus star on the podcast. And if you want to see more of the Flying Gaonas, I have links to some of his YouTube videos as well as a documentary about the Gaonas in the show notes. So go check that out. Something that always comes through to me, I don't know why every time I'm like surprised by this, but how many of the greats talk about how it's not what you do, even though they're the greatest at doing those things, these high-level tricks, but they're always about how you do it. So I hope you take that into your next training session, your next performance, remembering that, yeah, the tricks are nice, but the audience came to see you. Next week, we are continuing our episodes of Circus Greats. I have an interview with Alana Lev coming up. So if you don't want to miss that, hit subscribe to the Artist Athlete podcast. And you know what? I'm going to do a little bit of a giveaway. If you subscribe to the podcast, take a screenshot of it on your phone, send me a DM, and I'm going to send you a little something special. And if you want to know where to DM me, it's on Instagram at @the_artist_athlete. I'm on Facebook, The Artist Athlete. My website is www.theartistathlete.com. I'm also on TikTok, The Artist Athlete. And if you love what you're listening to and want to help the podcast, patreon.com/theartistathlete is the place to go. Thanks for listening, friends, fans, and foes. I'll talk at you next week. The Artist Athlete podcast is supported solely by donations from people like you. Here's what some of those people have to say.
Hi, my name is Noah and I do hand balancing. Hi, my name is Woody and I do Leo walk. Thank you for listening to the Artist Athlete podcast.
Hi, I'm Freya. You can hear my whole story in episode 50 of the Artist Athlete podcast, but I'm here to tell you about something else that I do. I'm a qualified health and nutrition coach. I help people with sleep and body confidence, among other things. You can see everything I have to offer at wildguidance.com or follow me on Instagram at wildguidance.
Hi everyone, I'm Dominique, a ground acrobat, trapeze artist, and coach, currently bringing Circus to the extremely cold but very beautiful Northern Ontario, Canada. Circus has changed my life and I'm so grateful to everyone in this community. Find me on Instagram at DomUpsideDown or my website domupsidedown.com.
Aloha! My name is Beth Russell and I live on the beautiful island of Maui, Hawaii. I am an aerial artist and movement instructor specializing in chakra yoga to keep me balanced and grounded. I play with silks, trapeze, lyra, rope, acro, aerial yoga and dance, slacklining, pole, bungee, and climbing. Really anything that goes up and allows me to explore 3D space. You can find my dedicated aerial page on Instagram at Maui Aerialist. If you find yourself coming to Maui, let's play.
Hey there, friends, fans, and enemies. This is Chris Alston, Patreon of the Artist Athlete podcast, straps artist and lyra performer and acrobat out of Greenville, South Carolina. So if you're ever passing through, make sure to stop in and see me and my friends. We have a wonderful space and we'd love to see you.
Hi, my name is Erica Lee. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm an aerialist. I teach performing arts to elementary school during the day and do pole and swing and rope by night. I really, really like the Artist Athlete podcast because it gives me a lot of circus goals to look forward to. It gives me a lot of insight on what's going on around the world in circus, and that's why I'm Patreon.
Hello all. Thank you for tuning in to the Artist Athlete podcast. I am Opal Schwartz from Minneapolis, Minnesota. If you're ever in the cities, feel free to stop by the Aviary Minneapolis. It's a great time. With that, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week, and goodbye.
Hey there, artists and athletes. This is Andy Smith, owner and artistic director at Saltaire Circus School in Jacksonville Beach, Florida. And I want to thank you for contributing to the Artist Athlete podcast. If you ever find yourself down in Florida, come check us out. Whether you're an artist, athlete, or someone ordinary just looking to be extraordinary, we got a place for you.